Rylan moved through the strange alien forest with slow steps, feeling the soft glowing dust under his boots. His ship had crashed hours ago, and now he had only one goal in mind, to survive long enough to find a signal or shelter. The forest around him was beautiful but dangerous, filled with tall blue trees that hummed like machines and plants that opened and closed like living mouths. Every sound made him alert, and every shadow made him reach for his small laser tool. He kept telling himself that he would be fine, but the deeper he went, the less sure he felt. Something moved behind him. Rylan froze. He turned slowly, expecting a hostile beast or a native hunter, but the shadows only shifted and settled again. He took a breath and continued walking, though his heart beat faster. He had heard stories of this planet, stories of creatures that watched from the dark, creatures that were smarter than they looked and deadly when hungry. The thought made him walk faster, even if he tried to stay calm. Suddenly, a soft cry echoed through the trees. It was a small sound, weak and full of pain. Rylan stopped again. The sound came a second time, this one sharper, almost like a scared child calling for help. He looked around, unsure if he should follow it. Getting involved with unknown life forms was dangerous. But leaving someone to suffer felt wrong. After a moment of hesitation, he walked toward the sound. The glowing trees parted to reveal a small figure on the ground, curled up beside a fallen log. Rylan stepped closer and felt his breath catch. It was a young alien girl, maybe no older than 8 in human years. Her skin was pale silver, and faint glowing markings ran along her arms. She had long dark hair that shimmered like liquid night, but all of this beauty was overshadowed by the deep injury on her leg. Dark blue blood leaked slowly from the wound, staining the moss beneath her. When she saw him, she tried to crawl away, fear in her wide purple eyes. She winced in pain and collapsed again. Rylan raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke softly, telling her he would not hurt her, but she shook her head, trembling. It was clear she believed humans were dangerous, maybe even monsters. Rylan did not blame her. Many alien races saw humans as aggressive, selfish, or unpredictable. But right now, none of that mattered. She was hurt. And she needed help. Rylan knelt beside her, moving slowly so she would not panic. She tried to push him away weakly, but he gently checked her wound. The cut was deep, likely made by a sharp creature's claw. Without treatment, she would not survive long. Rylan looked around and saw fresh tracks on the ground, large and heavy. Something big had attacked her, and whatever it was could still be close. The idea made him tense, but he forced himself to stay calm for her sake. He reached into his small emergency kit and pulled out a sealant patch. When he touched her leg, she flinched and closed her eyes, expecting pain. Rylan worked quickly, cleaning the wound and sealing it with the patch. The bleeding slowed, and her breathing relaxed a little. When she opened her eyes again, she looked surprised. She had not expected a human to help her. She stared at him quietly, fear slowly turning into confusion. Before Rylan could say anything else, the ground trembled under his feet. A deep rumble rolled through the forest. The girl's eyes widened in panic. She grabbed Rylan's sleeve, shaking her head rapidly, as if telling him to run. Rylan looked around, fear gripping his chest. Something huge was moving through the forest. The trees shook. The ground vibrated with each heavy step. Whatever had attacked the girl was returning. Rylan lifted her carefully in his arms, trying not to hurt her leg. She let out a tiny gasp but held on to him tightly. He moved quickly, scanning for a safe place to hide. The forest felt alive now, every tree whispering danger. Bright insects scattered into the air, and animals ran between the bushes. The trembling grew stronger. A roar echoed behind him, low and angry. The sound shook the air and chilled Rylan to the bone. He ran behind a fallen tree that formed a natural shelter. He crouched down, holding the girl close so she would not cry out in fear. She buried her face in his chest, shaking. Rylan whispered to her to stay quiet. The monster's roar came again, much closer now. The trees rustled as something massive pushed through them. From behind the log, Rylan saw a giant shadow moving, huge and violent. The beast sniffed the air, its heavy breathing filling the silence. Rylan held his breath, afraid even the sound of breathing would give them away. The girl clung to him, her small fingers digging into his shirt. The monster walked slowly, dragging its claws along the ground. The sound made Rylan's spine tighten. He could not fight this thing, not with the weapons he had. All he could do was stay hidden and pray it moved on. After a long moment, the trembling steps started to fade. The monster moved deeper into the forest. Rylan waited until the sound disappeared completely, then let out a deep breath he did not know he was holding. The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion and fear, but also with a small spark of trust. Rylan stood up again, carrying her carefully. He had no idea what danger lay ahead, but he knew one thing clearly: he could not leave her alone. He would protect her, even if it meant facing whatever hunted her. As he walked deeper into the glowing forest, he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The forest grew darker as Rylan carried the injured alien girl through the glowing branches, the faint blue light of the trees flickering like warning signs around them. He could feel her weak breathing against his chest, each breath small and shaky, as if she expected danger at any moment. Rylan knew they needed to find a safe place, but this forest felt like it had no safe places at all. Every sound seemed to follow them. Every shadow seemed to watch them. He stopped near a cluster of giant roots that twisted upward like walls. He set the girl down gently so he could catch his breath. She watched him with wide purple eyes, fear mixed with confusion. She still did not fully understand why a human was helping her, and Rylan did not know how to explain it. He only knew that he could not leave her alone in this deadly place. He opened his pack and pulled out a small canteen. He helped her drink a little water. She took it slowly, still studying him, like she was trying to decide if he was really safe or just hiding danger behind kindness. Rylan smiled softly, trying to make her feel calm, but before he could say anything else, the ground trembled again, this time sharper, faster, and coming from above rather than the ground. A deep hum filled the air, low and powerful. The girl's eyes widened in sudden terror. She grabbed Rylan's hand tightly, shaking her head again and again. Rylan looked upward, confused. He expected some kind of monster, but what he saw shocked him so deeply that he forgot to breathe for a moment. A huge alien ship descended between the glowing trees, silver and black, shaped like a giant wing with golden energy running along its edges. The air vibrated with its power. The girl began to cry softly, whispering something in her own language. Rylan did not understand the words, but he understood the emotion. She was afraid, deeply afraid, not of the monster from before, but of whoever was inside that ship. The ship landed with a heavy thud that shook the forest floor. Rylan pulled the girl closer, unsure what to do. The trees bent from the ship's energy as the lower deck opened like the jaw of a beast. A group of tall alien guards stepped out, each one covered in deep-colored armor with glowing symbols on their chests. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy, and their movements were sharp, disciplined, and angry. But it was the being who stepped out last that made the air freeze, a towering alien queen, taller than all her guards and wearing elegant, terrifying armor that rippled with living light. Her presence felt like standing in front of a storm, silent but full of destruction waiting to explode. Her eyes glowed a fierce gold, full of rage and fear at the same time. The girl in Rylan's arms whispered a single word, a word filled with pain and longing: mother. The queen's head snapped toward the sound, her eyes locked onto her injured daughter, and then onto Rylan holding her. The entire world seemed to stop, even the forest went silent. The queen's face twisted with shock and fury. Her child, her princess, in the arms of a human, the very species her people considered violent and untrustworthy. The guards reacted instantly, aiming their weapons at Rylan. The queen raised her hand, and the air vibrated dangerously. Rylan felt his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. He slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. The girl clung to him even tighter, as if begging her mother not to attack him. That tiny action made the queen hesitate for the first time. The queen stepped closer, her golden eyes burning into him. She spoke in a low, powerful voice, demanding answers. her voice echoed through the trees like thunder. Rylan could not understand the words, but her tone was clear. Why was a human touching her daughter? Why was her daughter protecting him instead of screaming for help? Rylan had no way to explain himself, so he did the only thing he could. He gently lowered the girl to the ground and lifted his hands even higher, showing surrender. The girl cried and reached for him again, surprising the queen. She placed her small hand on Rylan's arm, pointing at her patched wound, then pointing at him, trying to show that he had saved her. The queen stared, stunned. Her guards lowered their weapons slightly, confused. It did not make sense to them either. Humans were enemies, humans were dangerous, humans were the reason their people had suffered for generations, but here was a human who had saved their princess instead of harming her. Before anyone could speak, the forest suddenly exploded with sound. Trees snapped in half, the ground shook violently, the terrifying roar returned, louder and angrier than ever before. The monster that had hurt the princess was coming back, and this time it sounded furious. The queen's eyes widened, her expression shifting from rage to sudden fear for her child. The guards moved into formation, preparing for battle. Rylan acted without thinking. He grabbed the girl again and pulled her out of the way as a massive shadow lunged toward the queen's soldiers. The monster burst through the trees, its stone-like body glowing with red cracks, its roar shaking the air. The queen snapped her head toward Rylan for a brief moment, her expression filled with shock yet again. The human had saved her daughter twice now, even when surrounded by enemies, even with weapons aimed at him. And that changed everything. The queen raised her hand, signaling her guards to stop pointing their weapons at Rylan. Her golden eyes watched him closely, full of confusion and new, unfamiliar respect. The monster roared again, ready to attack, and the queen and Rylan found themselves standing side by side, united by danger neither of them had expected. For the first time in her life, the alien queen allowed a human to stand beside her, and the forest held its breath as a new battle began. The monster's roar tore through the forest like a storm, shaking the glowing trees and scattering the bright flying insects in panic. Rylan felt the air vibrate against his skin, and the alien girl tightened her grip around his neck as he held her close. He could feel her fear, her small heart racing fast, and he knew that the creature had come back for her, the same creature that had almost killed her before. The queen stepped forward with a furious expression, her golden eyes glowing brighter as she summoned energy into her armored gauntlets. The guards formed a protective circle around her, their weapons raised, humming with deadly power. Rylan stood behind them, still holding the girl, unsure whether he should run or stay. The queen glanced at him once, her eyes sharp but conflicted. She did not trust him, yet she no longer saw him as an enemy. The monster finally burst into view. Its body looked like a giant living statue, made of black stone with glowing cracks running through it like molten fire. Each step made the ground shake and sent dust flying into the air. The creature's eyes burned red with rage, and its sharp claws tore through the roots and vines as if they were nothing. It roared again, the sound deep and hungry. The queen shouted an order to her guards, and they opened fire, beams of blue energy shooting toward the beast. But the monster moved faster than something so large should be able to. It swung its massive arm, smashing the ground and sending a shockwave that threw the guards back. Rylan stumbled but kept his grip on the girl, shielding her with his body as debris flew around them. The queen slid back but stayed on her feet, her armor absorbing the worst of the impact. Rylan looked around desperately for a place to hide, but the forest had turned into a battlefield. Trees crashed down, glowing plants exploded into bright dust, and the ground cracked open from the force of the monster's attacks. He knew he could not protect the girl alone without help. He turned to the queen, hoping she would understand. She looked at him, then at her daughter, and something in her expression changed. It was as if she finally understood that he was not a threat. The monster lunged toward the queen, raising its claws to strike. Rylan shouted a warning, and the queen dodged just in time, rolling across the ground and firing a beam of golden energy at the beast. The attack hit the creature in the chest, making it stumble back with a deafening roar. The queen stood tall again, her armor shining, her energy crackling like lightning around her. Rylan saw an opening. He placed the girl behind a thick root for cover, telling her to stay low. Then he grabbed a small device from his belt. It was a flash pulse, a tool used to stun predators on unknown planets. He had only one, and using it wrong could kill him, but he had no choice. He ran to the side, away from the queen and the guards, trying to get the monster's attention. He shouted loudly, waving his arms. The creature turned its blazing red eyes toward him, focusing on the small moving human. The queen gasped in shock, yelling at him in her language, but Rylan could not understand her words. He only knew she wanted him to stop, but he could not. The girl needed time to stay safe, and the queen needed a distraction. The monster charged toward Rylan with terrifying speed, its heavy steps shaking the forest floor with every stride. Rylan waited until it was close enough, the ground trembling under his feet, then he activated the flash pulse and threw it at the beast's face. A blinding white explosion of light filled the air, even brighter than the glowing trees. For a moment, everything went silent. The creature staggered back, roaring in confusion and rage. It clutched its head, thrashing wildly as it tried to regain its senses. The queen took that moment to attack, leaping forward with incredible strength and slamming both her energy-charged fists into the monster's chest. The impact sent out a shockwave of golden light that cracked the creature's stone armor and forced it backward. The guards recovered and fired again, their combined energy blast striking the creature's weak points. The monster finally let out a deep, pained roar and fell to one knee. The queen did not hesitate. She gathered all her power and unleashed a final blast of golden energy that tore through the creature's core. The red glow in its cracks faded, and the monster collapsed with a heavy thud that shook the forest one last time. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of the girl crying softly. Rylan rushed back to her, lifting her into his arms again. She held him tightly, her tears soaking into his shirt. The queen approached slowly, her armor dimming as her energy settled. She stared at Rylan, not with anger now, but with something closer to disbelief and respect. She had seen him risk his life not once but twice to protect her daughter, something no human had ever done for her people before. The guards watched nervously, unsure what their queen would do next. Rylan stood still, breathing hard, waiting for whatever judgment she decided. The queen stepped closer and touched the girl's cheek gently. The princess looked up at her mother, then pointed at Rylan again, whispering something in her weak voice. The queen listened, then slowly turned her gaze to the human holding her child. For a long moment, she said nothing, then she reached out her hand toward him, not in attack, but in acknowledgement. It was the first sign of trust she had ever shown a human, and in that silent moment, something powerful shifted between them, something that would change the future of both their species forever. The forest was quiet again, but it was a heavy, tense kind of quiet, the kind that warned of dangers not yet gone. Rylan held the girl close, feeling her shaking slowly calm down as she pressed her face into his shoulder. The queen stood only a few steps away, her armor glowing softly, her golden eyes fixed on the human who had saved her daughter twice now. The guards waited behind her, unsure whether they should still aim their weapons or bow their heads in respect. Rylan could feel their confusion, and he could feel the queen's uncertainty even stronger. The queen lowered her hand slowly, her fingers trembling for the first time. She spoke a few words in her language, her voice softer than before. The princess whispered a reply and pointed toward Rylan again. The queen turned her gaze to him with a strange mix of emotions, suspicion still clinging to her, but now softened by gratitude, curiosity, and something she had not felt toward a human in decades, trust. Rylan kept his hands visible, showing he had no intention of harming anyone. The queen took a small step closer, her tall frame looming but no longer threatening. The guards shifted nervously, unsure if they should stop her or follow her lead. The queen raised one hand, and her guards instantly lowered their weapons, the forest filling with a soft exhale of relief. That simple movement was more powerful than any words she could have spoken. Rylan tried to speak, but the queen lifted her hand, stopping him gently. She studied him closely, as if trying to see the truth inside him, his intentions, his heart, his reason for risking his life for someone he did not know. Her glowing eyes softened just a little more, enough to show that she had made a decision, not a full one, but enough to shift the future between their species. Before anyone could say anything more, the ground shook again, but this time it was not from a monster. It came from the sky above. A deep, rising sound echoed through the air, the same kind that warned of ships arriving fast. The queen snapped her head upward, and her guards raised their weapons again. Rylan felt his blood run cold. He knew that sound, he had heard it before. It was a human rescue ship. But this was not good news, not here, not now. A human ship landing while he was holding an alien princess could trigger a war he never intended to start, and the queen clearly believed the same. Her eyes narrowed, her body tensed, and the guards formed a protective wall around her. The princess clung to Rylan more tightly, sensing the rising tension. The clouds split open as a human search vessel descended, its bright white lights cutting through the dark glowing forest. Trees swayed from the force, leaves scattering like sparks in the night. The queen stepped forward, ready to defend her daughter from whatever came next. Rylan stepped forward too, raising one hand toward the sky, trying to signal the crew to stay calm, but the queen grabbed his wrist, her grip strong. She shook her head sharply, warning him that trusting humans here could be dangerous for all of them. The human ship landed roughly, the dust forming thick clouds around it. A group of soldiers rushed out, wearing heavy armor and carrying advanced weapons. Their leader pointed toward Rylan immediately, shouting orders. They saw him holding an alien child, surrounded by alien warriors, and they assumed the worst. Rylan felt fear twist inside him. He shouted that they needed to stop, but his voice was drowned by the noise and confusion. The queen stepped in front of her daughter, her armor glowing brighter, preparing for battle. The guards raised their weapons again, aiming at the human soldiers. Energy crackled in the air, ready to explode into violence. Rylan saw how fast this could turn into a bloodbath. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and both sides would destroy each other. Rylan raised both hands and shouted louder, stepping between the queen and the soldiers. The princess reached out to him, her voice soft and scared. Her mother watched him with intense focus, waiting to see what he would do. Rylan faced the human soldiers and told them to lower their weapons. His voice cracked with urgency, but the leader refused, yelling that the aliens were hostile and dangerous. The queen growled softly, a sound filled with warning. Her guards prepared to fire. The human soldiers tightened their stance, ready to shoot first. The tension became unbearable. And then something unexpected happened. The princess crawled out of Rylan's arms and stepped between both sides. She limped forward with her injured leg but stood tall, raising her small hand toward the humans. Her glowing purple eyes were filled with tears, but she did not hide her fear. She pointed at Rylan, then placed her hand on her heart, showing everyone who had saved her, who had protected her. Her simple gesture froze the soldiers where they stood, and even the queen's breath caught softly. Rylan stepped beside her and held her gently so she would not fall. The queen watched with wide eyes, realizing that her daughter, her only heir, trusted the human more than anyone else here. The human soldiers began to lower their weapons slowly, confused and moved by what they were seeing. The queen stepped forward too, her golden eyes softening with a new, strange acceptance. The forest became silent again, the moment hanging in the air like a fragile thread that held peace on one side and destruction on the other. And for the first time in history, both sides chose peace. Rylan stood with the princess beside him and the queen watching cautiously, knowing that the future had just changed in a way no one had expected. The forest stood in a strange quiet, not peaceful, but tense and waiting, like the world itself was holding its breath. Rylan kept one arm around the princess so she would not fall, and the queen watched the scene with eyes that glowed like molten gold. The human soldiers looked confused and unsure, and the alien guards still held their weapons ready, no one fully trusting the moment, yet no one willing to break it. The princess reached out and touched Rylan's hand gently, as if showing both sides that he was not the enemy. Her voice was weak, shaky, but filled with something stronger than fear. She spoke a single word in her language, a word that carried a heavy meaning: trust. The queen's eyes widened slightly at her daughter's courage. She stepped closer, her armored feet making soft thuds on the glowing ground. The soldiers tensed, but Rylan lifted one hand, silently asking them not to fire. The queen raised her own hand slowly, not in attack, but in recognition. The glowing symbols on her armor dimmed, showing that she did not wish to fight anymore. Her golden eyes moved from her daughter, to Rylan, to the human soldiers. She spoke quietly, but her voice carried through the forest like warm thunder. Rylan could not understand the words, yet he felt their meaning in her tone. Her daughter was alive because of this human, and because of that, she would not allow war here today. The human commander looked unsure, sweat rolling down his forehead. He lowered his weapon a little, but not fully. His eyes darted between Rylan and the queen. Rylan shouted that the aliens were not attacking, that the creature they killed was the real threat. The commander hesitated, but before he could respond, the ground rumbled again. Rylan's heart dropped. He turned his head, expecting another monster, another threat, something new and deadly, but instead, the queen lifted her hand calmly, signaling that this rumble was something else, something expected. A second alien ship descended slowly, larger than the queen's, shaped like a giant floating temple with shining rings circling its body. Its arrival was gentle, peaceful, like a calm star falling from the sky. The queen turned toward it with a solemn expression. This was no warship, this was a royal vessel, a ship that carried the ancient laws of her people. The princess looked at it with wide eyes, realizing what her mother was about to do. Rylan felt her body tense slightly in his arms. The queen approached him slowly, each step measured and heavy with meaning. Rylan stood still, unsure if she wanted to thank him or declare him prisoner. Her guards parted to let her through, bowing their heads as she passed. The queen stopped in front of Rylan, towering over him, her presence powerful yet strangely calm now. She reached out her hand and rested it over her daughter's injured leg. Her touch was gentle, glowing with healing energy. The princess closed her eyes, relaxing a little. The queen then moved her hand upward and placed it lightly over Rylan's chest, right where his heart beat fast beneath his shirt. Rylan froze, unsure what she was doing, but he felt a strange warmth spreading across his chest. The queen whispered a single word in her deep voice, a word filled with centuries of meaning. The alien guards gasped softly, even the princess opened her eyes in shock. The human soldiers looked confused, but Rylan felt the truth of it in his bones. The queen had given him the mark of protection, a rare honor that meant he was now under the personal shield of the alien royalty. No one from her species could harm him now, not even her own army. The mark glowed faintly on his chest like a golden flame, pulsing with life. The queen stepped back, looking at him with something close to respect. For the first time, she lowered her head slightly, a gesture that shocked even her own guards. It was not a bow, but it was close enough to show what she felt: gratitude, recognition, acknowledgement. The human commander stepped forward, stunned. He lowered his weapon completely, and so did his soldiers. Their fear melted into confusion, then into something like awe. They had never seen a human protected by alien royalty before, never seen an alien princess hold a human so closely, never seen a queen make peace so openly. The queen motioned for Rylan to walk toward her ship, inviting him to follow. The princess held out her arms to him, wanting him to carry her. Rylan glanced back at the human commander, who gave a slow nod, telling him to go, telling him to do what he believed was right. Rylan carried the princess toward the alien vessel, its great rings glowing softly as if welcoming him. The queen walked beside him in silence, her presence no longer heavy with anger but filled with something new, a quiet strength, a quiet trust. Behind them, both armies watched without speaking, as if witnessing a moment that would be written in history forever. Inside the ship, the air was warm and filled with soft golden light. The princess smiled weakly for the first time, her small hand gripping Rylan's fingers. The queen looked at him and spoke in a soft tone, trying to use a few words in human language. "Thank you, human." Rylan nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The queen pointed toward a viewing window, showing the endless stars beyond. She placed her hand on her daughter's head and then on Rylan's shoulder, a silent promise that this human had earned something no other human ever had, a place among them. But as the ship began to rise, Rylan felt something strange, a cold feeling, like eyes watching from far away. He turned toward the forest one last time, and deep between the glowing trees, he saw another shadow, something large, something moving, something that had not joined the battle, something that had been watching all along. And its glowing eyes promised that this story was far from over.